Welcome back, dear listeners, to another exciting episode of Let's Talk Retail. We've been on a brief hiatus, realigning our priorities to bring you even more insightful discussions and thought provoking conversations. But fear not, because today we're back with a bang, ready to delve into the future of retail like never before. In today's episode, we have a special treat lined up for you. Joining us is an entrepreneur and thought leader, Barada Sahu, the founder of Mason. With over 2 decades of experience in the e-commerce and AI landscape, Barada is the forefront of revolutionizing how we perceive and navigate the world of retail. But before we dive into our conversation, let me take a moment to express our gratitude for your continued support and patience. Sit back, relax, and get ready for an interesting discussion as we explore the mysteries of unified commerce, the impact of AI on retail, and much more. And who knows, you might just walk away with a fresh perspective on the future of retail. There's a fancy setup behind you.
It's not too fancy. It's a few monitors and things,
That's
but
right.
yes, I think it's not too office.
Yeah. You know, all these monitors and all that suddenly remind me of the sci-fi movie we saw years back. And suddenly you hear and realize that all of this that is becoming reality.
There's this thing that Kaus and I and a lot of our people speak is sci-fi. A lot of the science fiction that we have read in our times are now
Right.
starting to come to life almost, whether it's screens that we can interact with directly or whether we can overlay the world on top of a virtual world on top of the real world and be immersed in the new worlds by themselves. A lot of them are coming to life.
Absolutely. First, before we start, I think, welcome to Let's Talk Retail. And good to have you here. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Likewise, I'm looking forward to talk with you and hopefully we'll have a good chat. I will speak
Absolutely. Yeah.
for a few.
So we've been constantly going back and forth you know, and I heard that you've been traveling a lot. You've been globetrotting.
In the Middle East, largely this time around, spending some time in Saudi initially, and then
Right.
I was in UAE, both at Abu Dhabi and Dubai. But very interesting ecosystems coming up over there because this was my first trip to Saudi. I
Okay.
had not been there, and it was very exciting to see that the whole economy is modernizing. The whole country itself is going through a radical transformation. Very excited to see some of the stuff that's happening.
Yeah, I think we'll come back to it a little later. I would really want to start off with, of course, I went through your LinkedIn profile. I spoke to, I think, one of your colleagues earlier, and also spoke to your co-founder, Kosambi. You were in Mintra, you were predominantly e-commerce. Walk us through your journey first and why you started Mason.
Maybe I just rewind back. I mean, I'm an old hack, by the way. I've been in technology for now over a couple of decades, building products, taking them to market, and working on all different aspects from thinking about what products make sense for consumers to actually building them hands on as an engineer.
Right.
And I've worked globally. I've spent my first half of my career, as I would say, in enterprise technology, working with some of the largest names that you can think of, all the financial giants from Citi to having worked with teams like Daimler to teams like BMW, all of the consumer companies that we kind of interact on a everyday basis and spend a bunch of time over there. But this was the early part of the startup days in India, and I was very much a part of that wave. For me, it was super exciting that as India was coming to life in terms of making these companies and products come to life, I thought that it would be super exciting to venture on my own journey. I did my first company where we're building a platform to build mobile and desktop applications together with one SDK of sorts. And we exited that to the Flipkart group. And that was actually my introduction itself into the world of e-commerce per se. Prior to that, I spent some time at Daimler where we had worked on a bunch of the supply chain problems, but this was the full blend of e-commerce working at the Flipkart. And I joined the Myntra team over there, heading out a bunch of the storefront initiatives from how do you do personalization, how do you understand consumers, what content works for them. And as you know, fashion as a domain is very inspiration centric. People love to browse before they buy. And
Right.
so you have to figure out everything from how do you go from deals led to really content first and inspiration led commerce. And so there was a bunch of those initiatives that we kickstarted. And it was super exciting to be part of that phase. Myntra was going through this very rapid transition from deals to this content and commerce led, very exciting engineers, very exciting product talent that was out there. And I would say some of the best consumer product talent in India that had aggregated over there. We had a good fun time over there, spent a couple of years out there on a bunch of these different consumer centric initiatives. And that's as I was working with them, we also saw that there were a lot many more brands which were coming online. Myntra itself was rapidly growing because there were a lot many more new brands just on the Myntra platform.
Right.
And this was just fashioned by them. There was a lot many more brands which were starting to retail on Flipkart, starting to retail on Amazon. And we said that what is it that really moves the needle for these brands? And that understanding came out of having worked a little bit and with these brands at Myntra, where we started to realize some of the problems that these brands face. And that really was, in some sense, the genesis for the idea behind Mason, in some sense. And me starting off Mason was some of the learnings that we had from working in the marketplaces. They really have come together in the platform. Obviously, as we have continued to work with customers, some of those ideas have evolved. But I would say the core foundational insights came from having worked at marketplaces, which really kind of aggregate and bring these brands to life for consumers. And those were, I would say, the building blocks for our insights for Mason.
Mason. I can relate to, the whole ethos and fashion because having spent 11 years, albeit in a slightly on a different channel, have literally seen the browse and buy kind of year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then things slowly start changing because the browsing happened and the buying happened elsewhere and stuff like that.
And that's exactly what used to happen. And in fact, today that problem is a lot more amplified as there are more and more channels for consumers to discover, to interact. People anticipate, you would say that the consumer journey has started to become more and more fragmented. People are browsing on Instagram, people are browsing on YouTube, people are discovering products from ads, people are discovering products from content driven by influencers. There's a lot of different channels for people to discover. But at the end of the day, the shopping is still within the shop. And I think that's one of those themes maybe we'll also touch upon.
When you started Mason, did you think, hey, I want to solve this problem?
Maybe kind of click a little bit on in terms of how we discover the problem before we kind of go to solving the problem. I'll tell you about the problem discovery. I was telling you a little earlier about we saw a lot many more brands coming online. But what we really saw was that what really drives growth for those brands is an understanding of consumers. And that's really what we did well at the marketplaces. All of our stack was actually based on how do you understand consumers, what they're interacting with, what products they like, what kind of offers, discounts, promotions are they liking, what kind of content do they want to see. And that was really the foundational insight that leads to the entire consumer journey on the marketplaces. Why should consumers continue to come back to you if they have exciting content? If you understand what kind of content takes for them, if you can engage them, then of course we can show them the relevant end products. You can bring to them their offers. And that's really the foundational insight that it was very centered around consumers. When we saw that a lot many more brands coming online, we said that, not all brands can go ahead and start to say that I will start building consumer insight platforms from my own. And you say it's a technology problem that you probably want to use rather than build from scratch. Because within the marketplace platform where there's a dedicated technology, we had a 100-member storefront team and a 300-member overall engineering team, including supply chain side. And you say that there were about 50 to 60 people just dedicated at solving this problem. Now, for brands who are coming online, you can't have 50 to 60 engineers solving this problem for you. And we said that, but this is the heart of what leads to growth. What kind of products you bring to market really relies on whether you have consumer insights at your fingertips. You know what consumers want to buy, where they want to shop, what they want to interact with. And that was really the discovery of the problem for us, which is like, today brands cannot invest in a large consumer understanding infrastructure. And how can we make it easier for brands to say that they can be more data driven, they can be more consumer first? And how can you make it easy for them? That's really what led to what we say Mason as a solution over a period of time. But that was where the solution iterations came as to what were those solutions. Do we build a consumer intelligence platform? Do we build a engine that helps you interact with consumers and make it more accessible and make this intelligence more actionable? What were those solutions? They evolved later on. But I think the foundational insight of this being the problem that brands need to understand consumers easier and then be able to drive the experience was really the insight that led to us saying that, hey, we want to solve this problem and make it easier for brands to scale and grow online.
Fantastic. Because I think that's what I remember discussing this sometime in 2013, 2014. Hey, how much do we know about a consumer? Can we predict what he or she is going to do? Obviously, it was not very easy because data was very limited.
Absolutely.
And today, of course, you have a lot more data points, a lot more touch points, and a lot of footprint that you can actually map and that can be used. Where did this term called? Sorry, you're saying something.
No, I think you make a good point in terms of while there are a lot many more foot points, even today for brands to be able to utilize those foot points is still a very tough job because, there is data is easily available, but at the same point of time, making sense of the data is really hard because that's a tough job in itself. You have different kinds of data that's coming in from consumers sharing their own preferences of what they like to say consumers interacting with your content on different platforms. But how do you really make sense of that? And I would say that even while this has gone, it has become a lot better. I would say brands are still not there yet. There's a lot of brands across the board who still continue to struggle as to how do I make sense of this data and how do I utilize this data? Even the largest brands in the world you would think of, they still, while they're sitting on a ton of data, they still don't know how to make this data useful and actionable for really ensuring that they can deliver that hyper-personal experience that really leads to consumers feeling that the brands understand it on a one-on-one level.
This is the exact question I want to ask you. I think you kind of spoke about it. I still speak to a lot of retail brands even today, and I sense that gap. There is a need or there is a want, but how do I get there is something that's missing. Yeah. Is that how you coined the term unified commerce?
Yeah. Unified is while the term has been evolving over a period of years, I think the basic precepts of what unified means hasn't, what I would say is an evolution rather than a revolution in itself. And I will speak about it. It all comes down to, again, understanding consumers. There are a lot of channels, as you know, for consumers to discover and buy products today, from social to marketplaces, to retail, to direct online channels, to say direct channels like email and SMS. There's a lot of different touch points for a consumer today where they can discover and shop for your products. But if you look at it, what you've been saying is that we've started coining these terms called phygital, which is you have both a physical as well as a digital presence. We have had these terms called omni-channel, which is like there are all different channels that you can sell across. What unified basically says is that it's taking an evolution of this very concepts of phygital and omni-channel to say that, look, you can still operate a lot of different channels, but all of these channels can also operate in silos. They can all be operated by either individual operators, or you would not have the visibility, the entire transparency of how business operates well on each channel. A classic example is that what kind of offers are working on which channels. You would not be you'd be running different digital offers to different in-store offers, for example, or different marketplace offers. Or maybe have product assortment, which is very different. Or you would not have a visibility into what inventory is there in your warehouse, in your shop, versus what are you selling online. And what is the demand? Because return patterns are also very different for both in shop. In shop, you might drop it back into the store. But, online returns are a whole cycle in it itself. You have an RTO cycle. There is very different visibility into the supply chain. What Unified talks about is that can we bring in a centralization into this entire infrastructure of saying whether you are selling on marketplaces, online, digital channels, social channels, or direct channels, can you unify that entire visibility and connect the dots that all the consumer who's actually shopping on all of these different touch points, they start to feel this very hyper personal experience. Independent of whether they're shopping you on a marketplace or on social channel, they should feel it's the same brand. Is this a similar kind of offers? I can avail my offers which are made for me on both channels. I should not be able to have discriminatory offers at that point. That's really at the heart of what you say, unification of commerce and unified commerce.
You made an interesting point there called hyper personalization. Can you just, kind of go a little deep into that? Because I'm sure some of the listeners would possibly not be aware of this word called hyper personalization.
Typically, we have, and personalization again, one of those terms, it's not new in the industry. The industry has been hearing, especially if you've been in the retail space, I'm pretty sure that for the last 20 years, you have been hearing about personalization being one of those driving forces that drives commerce. But it's really, how do you really leverage personalization today? And what has been also the evolution in that stack itself? And we'll kind of talk a little bit about that. Personalization, as it has grown over the years, it has been primarily about finding out which cohorts of customers, or what you say, which groups of customer? How can you really identify those common patterns for those groups? For example, it could be commonality based on the kind of products that you browsed, or it could be commonality based on a particular preference of a particular style that you kind of showed an affinity towards, or it could be a commonality because you are from a particular geography. And there are various ways of slicing and dicing your consumer segments. And that has typically been the traditional approach for most brands, retailers today to look at personalization. You have to build up these cohorts. To build these cohorts, you have to look at your consumer behavior using on top of your customer data platform or your CRM platform. And then you start doing these personalized messaging in terms of creating content which is specific to them, maybe creating offers, maybe creating specialized catalogs, etc. But that's typically been the approach to personalization over the years. But what you started to see is that the modern consumer today no longer wants to say that, hey, I want to be bucketed. I want to feel that you hear me as a brand, you are built for me. And when we speak about hyper personalization, and they're willing to share data, by the way, all of us as consumers, you would well know that we don't care about telling you about what's our favorite color, what's our fit, what's the size that we like, what kind of occasions do we want to buy for. We are willing to share away that data. But if you're not able to leverage that data well, you're losing my attention, you're losing my trust as a brand. And hyper personalization is really about understanding the consumer at a one-on-one level and being able to create these consumer profiles, but then be able to leverage that information to really create very specialized products. And what we are really starting to see is brands which are starting to emerge and evolve. They're really in tune with customers today. They really understand deeply what customers want, and they absolutely recommend you on point what kind of products would make sense for you, what kind of looks would really fit you, what kind of regimes would make sense for you if you're in beauty. When you are getting your recommendations, they feel that the brand is listening to you. And that's really about leaning in on at a one-on-one level rather than at these cohorted levels that we have seen over the years. And that's really where hyper-personalization is coming in. And again, the data points are starting to evolve because even as a individual and as a consumer, I am, as you would well know, as a consumer, we also go through our own life cycles. When you are younger, we have very different tastes. As we kind of age up, we have a very different taste profiles. So as I shift cities, I might have a very different taste profile because the environment itself has shifted. Maybe if I'm staying in Bombay versus whether I'm staying in Bangalore to in New York, I'll have very different taste profiles. Weather patterns are different. There are different kind of taste profiles. There's a lot of consumer insights that you get from as consumers are going through the life cycle. But can you leverage that to really build out products that make sense for them and deliver them those experiences? That's really what hyper personalization is. Looking at the customer as a unit of one rather than as a bucket of customers together.
There's been a lot, I think there's a lot of work happening. Spent a lot of time myself, and I wish some of this really existed sometime in 2013-14 when we were struggling at that time. Physical or offline retail was going through a bit of its challenges. Now, as Mason, is this problem that you're focusing on for the e-commerce space, omni-channel space, or does it also include someone who's only running, say, a set of offline stores?
Good question. For us as Mason, what we've been primarily, and when the product has continued to evolve with its legs, what we have been focused on is on enabling commerce as a whole. And today, commerce is no longer about only one channel. We spoke about this earlier. Today, commerce is by de facto omni-channel. Any brand, any scaled out brand, you'll have its footprint in retail. They'll have an online footprint because they need to understand consumers. They'll have a marketplace footprint, more likely than not. And oftentimes you'll have social channels. Commerce today by itself is across channels. And I don't see any retailer today who would just be purely on a single channel and hoping to tap into consumers and understanding consumers. For us, it has been enabling commerce as a whole rather than focus on a specific channel. While there are solutions for retailers, there are solutions for digital first brands, and hence looking at whether you are offline only, whether you are online only, or whether you have a mix of all these channels, we have solutions for you today across. Right. And I also tend to see that the digitization for Indian brands, and especially in the Indian context, I speak about in the global context, of course, in US and all, they're a little bit far ahead in terms of the digitization space itself. But India is rapidly getting digitized. Today, if you go to any retail conference, almost every retailer will talk to you about a digital strategy that they have in place. They're just not talking anymore about having a offline only strategy because consumer data is more available online. Today, as consumers, we spend a lot of time. We spend about 50% of our time online.
Right.
It's natural that retailers are where consumers are, and it's no longer going to be offline only or online only. And so it's always going to be a mixed channel effort. And what we do is that we kind of enable you across all these channels.
One interesting point you made, I think earlier in the discussion when you said CDP and CRM. CRM, of course, is a word that's being used, misused, overused, especially in the retail ecosystem. CDP is something that while, we've tried to propagate, or very few of them actually believe that they require a CDP. How are these two technologies, these two terminologies actually, integrating with your tech stack?
I'll speak. I mean, again, like if you look at the CRM space itself, and CRM is basically, in some sense, a more specialized version of marketing automation, because marketing automation is like a Uber umbrella in terms of where you can look at all different channels and we can automate it. And CRM is really about understanding consumers, your customer relationship management system, and where you kind of have an understanding of customers and you're able to communicate to customers. And because it's a relationship management, to any relationship requires communication. CRMs typically bridge that gap today for a lot of retailers, for a lot of brands today, where they help you communicate to customers. Now, what are the channels available for you to communicate to customers? Let's look at that. Typically, if you're looking purely as a communication standpoint, you would probably have email, lesser used in the Indian construct, but you have email as a channel. You have SMS as a channel. It's on your phone. And finally, you have your messaging channel. You typically have a WhatsApp messenger or some version of that on your phone. And you're typically using that to communicate both with your friends, but also be connecting with brands. And so you have a mix of all of these channels. Finally, you have other channels like social and all where you can discover. But typically, if you look at your traditional CRM, they'll typically look at some of these channels, a mix of these channels, your email, SMS, and your CRM channels. Along with that, they will also possibly bring some in-app notifications for your browsers or for your apps. And these are typically the channels that are managed by CRMs, again, with the customer at the center of it. That's typically what most CRMs do. Now, what CDPs do is that they take a slightly abstract view. They say that, you know what, your data about customers are not only coming in from these direct channels. You also have data that's streaming in from social channels. You also have data that's streaming in within your store as consumers go through that browsing journey. And on top of that, you have your transaction data, which is typically residing in your order system. And what a CDP does is that it acts like a central silo for all of this data. Because now suddenly you have browsing data, you have maybe your customer preference data, which the user is giving through engagement. You have your transaction data, and you have all of these coming in from different sources, from your direct channels to your maybe your physical channels where you are getting your transaction data from your POS, to basically your social channels and your shopping channels. You have a lot of this data coming in, and you cannot put them all into your CRM. Your CRM is just not built for handling data. Your CRM is a communication channel. It's not a data store. And so what most retailers would say is that once they want to understand consumers better, it's an evolution of the stack where a CDP really talks about how can you build these unified customer profiles with data streaming in from multiple channels, while the CRM takes care of communicating to the customer. Now, what we do is that we say that, look, you can communicate to the customer maybe with cohorts. And that's where I say that from our stack, we look at it as from how deeply do you understand the consumer, but then how well as you can you use that understanding of the consumer to create the shopping experience for you, which is tailored for you. That's where we come into the picture as Mason. What we do is that we sit on top of your existing CDP. If you have one, or if you don't have one, you can use us as a CDP as well. But we sit on top of your existing CDP. Okay? And then what we do is that we hyper-personalize the experiences across all these channels, which means some of these hyper-personalized experiences can be delivered via your CRM if you are already using one. If you don't have any of those channels activated, we will activate them for you. But we will connect you on all of these channels. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing it in your marketplace, on social, on your direct channels, or on retail channels. We will help you get on all of these channels together. At the end of the day, for business to run, business needs one unified view, no matter which channel you are running your business on.
Correct.
And that's really what we enable. How do you have this centralized system for ensuring that you can deliver hyper-personalized experiences across all channels? And so we integrate with your CRM, or you integrate with your CDP as needed.
You mentioned a very specific word called experiences. It's a word that's constantly being thrown around. Yeah. How can these technologies actually help?
First, a little step back. Shopping is not about buying. Shopping is not equal to the transaction. Shopping actually happens at the browsing part first, because for a lot of people who shop, they don't just shop by saying that I need X. Most of the time that you probably would not be needing that white shirt or that white t-shirt or that red shirt that you're looking at. You probably have half a dozen of them at your home today. Shopping is about inspiration and shopping is about experience. A lot of the reasons why we shop is not just necessarily because we need them, is also because we want them. And so the want part of it comes from the customer experience part of it. And for a large part of consumers today, it's about how do we create those want and how do we create those experiences that make them want the products that they want. Because shopping is not no longer about functionality. I think we've gone from this accessibility stage of where, online commerce was really about ensuring that products were easily available no matter what part of the country you stayed in. And really you needed a supply chain to be able to deliver that. You need a logistics platform to be able to deliver that to you within one day. And we kind of bridged across this problem. But as an economy, as we are growing, you're starting to see that consumption is rising because we want products, not because we only need them. And this experience part becomes a lot more critical in this stage, because that is what truly differentiates you as a brand. Your brand experience, your customer experience. And that customer experience is, by the way, not just paying lip service. That customer experience means every touch point that you have with your customer, whether it's on retail, whether it's online, whether it's marketplace, whether it's social, whether it's direct communication, everything forms part of your customer experience. Now, if you do not have the ability to, one, understand the consumer and the customer, and secondly, create these experiences for them, which feel tailored, you will be losing that customer attention. And customer attention, as you know, that continues to drop significantly as channels continue to hammer you with more content, easily available and stuff. You need to be really on point. And so when we speak about experience, we really talk about first from a customer first lens. It's customer experience centered around first understanding the customer and then being able to create those experiences. But what are those experiences really? It means your product catalogs. It means what kind of bundles, looks, regimes that you're kind of looking at. What kind of offers are you kind of bringing to the table for them? And secondly, what's relevant for them, most important. Those are all pieces of your customer experience and your customer browsing experience. And how do you get them to want some of the products?
Years ago, these were all jigsaw puzzles, pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. It was all lying elsewhere, somewhere else. And I think somewhere this whole thing is coming together.
Absolutely. I mean, what we would say is that in this, commerce is not, like online commerce is what, coming up on about 30 years old. Amazon was 94, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And that's when this started off. And what I usually like to also tell folks that I meet is that, online commerce may have kicked off in its whole entirety with Amazon, but you've seen the rise of marketplaces where everything together was in one stack. But it was generation one of commerce in some sense. We are 30 years out. We are still copying the Amazon playbook of a home collection, PDP, a cart checkout. It's the same journey that has been happening, but consumer behavior has changed. We live in an Instagram generation. We live in a TikTok generation where consumers want instant fulfillment. They want to discover product and shop there. They don't want a journey at that point of time. They want a very condensed, shoppable journey for them, which goes from discovery to checkout instantly, which means that you need to create shoppable experiences rather than think about, hey, I'll show you something and then I'll go through a whole cycle of buying cycle and I've lost their attention. It's really at the moment, can I get customers excited about what they're looking at and then basically get them to shop instead.
I was reading somewhere that attention spans have dropped to as low as something like 5 or 6 seconds.
They say that the human attention span is now less than that of a goldfish.
Oh, so how do you even manage to catch somebody's attention? The book must be sharp or the brain is sharp.
And this again goes down to having a good understanding of consumers. I think relevance is where it really the play is. What today as a modern consumer is that I don't want irrelevant stuff. I of course want exciting stuff and new stuff. And I think fundamentally, foundationally also as humans, we are wired to look for novelty. That's how our brain operates. We look for new stuff. We look for what's different. That's how our brain works. But beyond that, I think relevance is what it's top of mind. If you're irrelevant at any point in time, if you're saying something that does not connect the dots, people don't have the attention to listen to you. People don't have the attention to watch you. You've got to really be on point. When we speak about grabbing attention, it's one, being exciting, but also being on point.
Another thing that I want to ask you, one of the key challenges today in retail from a supply chain perspective and overall from an operational efficiency. So
Absolutely.
where does this help? Because this also at the end does play a part in the overall experience.
Today, we don't really work on the supply chain side, but there's a lot of exciting innovations. I'm sure that you must have heard of Sheen now introducing supply chain as a service, and where they're talking about micro batch manufacturing, and especially for fashion, for folks who are in fashion, and I'm hoping in BPC as well. And back in Mintra, by the way, we had a bunch of these initiatives which we wanted to kickstart off. We really wanted to do micro batch manufacturing here in India, but it's not possible unless you really have an infrastructure platform. Because for micro batch manufacturing, really today you need large MOQs with supplier vendors to be able to really get this product shipped in time. And especially if you look at large brands, the cycle for fashion is really, if you look at the oldest ones, they typically have a 2-year cycle. If you look at a little newer ones, they'll have a 1-year cycle.
Yeah.
And the best of the brands still have a 6-month cycle, by the way. That's how much into the future that they're predicting that this would be the styles that would work. But the season might have changed.
Correct.
Consumer preferences might have changed. And that's no way to really run a business. And so you always see over manufacturing, there's large amount of inventory lying which does not get sold out. You have a lot of wastage and all of these things happening. What you really need to think is that how do you also innovate on the supply chain side to be able to reduce those wastage? Because sustainability is also top of mind for a lot of the young consumers who are coming up. At least today, as of today, we live in a world which is depleting resources and where we have to be careful about how we use things and not just use them once and throw them away with waste. Given all this, we need to be relevant and we need to have a supply chain that can support those sustainable initiatives. A large part of it is about reducing those MOQs at which you manufacture on, shortening time cycles to get to customers, understanding consumer preference as well, and then building products. And all of these come together in terms of how you can build better. In fact, there was one of these brands in India itself where we were speaking about, and they had this very interesting anecdote. They initially launched this cream, which is more as a balm. And this was for hair care. It was in a hair care category or one of the supplement category, but it was really built as a balm. And as they launched that product, but they initially prototyped the product and they took it to market with a small batch that they had manufactured because they had an in-house manufacturing. But as they reached out to customers, customers said that this is not how I want the product. I want the product more as a pill, which I can use it at night, not as a balm, which I need to apply. And can you change the whole process itself? And so the product itself has to foundationally change. And see, if these cycles are 6 months or a year in advance, there's suddenly no way back for you. You really need to be sure. But today, accelerated supply chains, micro batch manufacturing can really help you bridge that. The ability to reach out to customers on digital first channels also means that you can understand consumers better and build those products that make sense for them. I think those are the things that need to tie in together to how do we kind of build better for our customers that make sense for them.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I asked you, because, if you know there's certain trends or certain patterns or styles that are moving very quickly, is that something that you can invest in, do not invest in? And should I change? All of that, those questions, I think, how quickly can someone answer them? I was wanting to know if that kind of a visibility is being provided or, I won't say a problem, but can that be addressed? Really?
No, this is definitely something that more and more brands today are investing in, as well as we also bring to the table with a suite of a solution. We are not the only provider for this, and pretty sure there are a bunch of other solutions also which bring this to the table today. But this is definitely an area in which more and more brands and retailers are today investing in, where they want to understand customers and see which product, which formulation really works for them, whether it's in BPC or what kind of styles really make sense for them, if it's in fashion, or what kind of, again, home furnishing, what kind of looks are really working for them, right? As the Pantone color changes, the flavor of the season also changes.
Point that has been going, kind of buzzing in my mind. And I've been wanting to ask you, there's so much of change that's happening. Customer behavior is evolving and constantly evolving. I don't think there's anything called constant there. And with all of this change that's happening, with all of this rapid shifts that are happening, especially from a retail perspective, how can these brands really adapt and stay ahead?
One that I always tend to say is that, see, even as technology changes, consumers are slower to change as compared to technological changes. You'll oftentimes find, and consumer behavior changes over a period of time. Even you might see the most exciting technologies, but it takes some time to drive adoption. Really dropping that, unless you're significantly dropping the friction in terms of the consumer experience. And oftentimes with consumers, It's really about understanding whether you are really reducing friction by a significant quanta for it to get adopted. But otherwise, consumer behavior really does not change as rapidly as it does. So it means the foundation of understanding consumers is always going to keep you safe as a retailer if you are anchored on that. If you are a brand, if you are a retailer who's investing in understanding customers, you cannot go wrong foundationally, no matter what technological shifts happen along the way, because the basics will still remain the same. That, hey, I understand what my customers want. I understand at what price points are they willing to afford. I understand what kind of styles, colors, looks, regimes that they're looking for, formulations are they looking for, and I can build for that. That's always going to be at the centerpiece of what your business today is. So I don't think that's going to go away anywhere soon. But that being said, new channels are continuing to emerge, which means that as a retailer, you need to adapt to say that I need to take advantage, because otherwise I'm missing the boat in terms of the ability to be efficient. Channels continue to, like, if you know, meta ads were cheap 5 years back before
Correct.
all the iOS changes kicked in, and now they're all through the roof. There's no way for you to completely rely on meta and today anymore scale a brand today, right?
Yeah.
You need to invest in your own customer understanding. You can no longer rely on third-party data and really driving in cheap traffic. That's no longer the case today. And that's going to keep on fragment because there are new channels continuing to emerge, which consumers continue to hop on, which means you also need to stay as a retailer in terms of taking advantage of these new channels that are emerging. And oftentimes new channels also create new opportunities because you can be first on the board, you can have a good understanding of consumers, but that really comes down to whether you understand your customers foundationally. If you understand it, you know how to apply it for the cohort of customers who are now on a new channel, because every new channel also appeals to Snap appeals to a different audience segment versus Insta versus say TikTok. And while over a period of time, there are other segments which also cross-pollinate, but typically each one of them has their specialized need states that they're serving for. And so you need to, as a brand and a retailer, understand the nuances of the channel and be available over there. The final point of being able to stay up to trend is also working together with good partners. I think one part that is understated is that as technology changes, you cannot do everything in-house. Commerce is an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem built around retailers, brands, vendors who are providing you the supply chain, logistic partners, your technology vendors, and all of them form a part of this ecosystem today, which will help you scale. If you have built good relationships over a period of time, along with all of the folks who enable it for you, I'm pretty sure they will help you keep up with trend because each one of them has their own specialized areas. Even in logistics, it keeps on evolving from, say, now we have quick commerce, which is a big trend where we want to, within 2 hours, everything we delivered now. Yeah.
10 minutes. 10 minutes.
10 minutes. No, 2 hours. We want everything. I ordered the mobile phone, I wanted it. And that's really the expectation. What you'll see is that you cannot do everything by yourself. You need to have that good ecosystem of vendors and partners. And they would really be the ones who will also help you keep up to date. Understanding and saying that who are those partners who you need to work with, who can keep you up to date. Because this fast moving ecosystem in all of these different spaces, you need to stay abreast to kind of be close to customers.
And coming back to the point that we started off with, you've been talking to a lot of brands in India and now, of course, Middle East. And I was told that you also have you're also looking at the US as a market. In terms of evolution, what do these three markets really hold? And this is more Barada as an entrepreneur.
I'll tell you more in terms of how I see markets evolving and in terms of innovation where it is happening on different segments. In the US, it's a lot more, there are a lot of today. Every niche itself being able to survive on its own as well. Because there are hyper-specialized brands from CPG to fashion to beauty, which are all looking at hyper-personalized experiences. And they're able to kind of demand those margins as well because the propensity to pay is much higher over there. And which means that even you can be a very niche business, but be able to scale out to a decent volume and be able to survive in the US with your own techniques. And that's why you've seen a lot of brands in the US in all different small areas. People might be just doing snacks. People might just be doing chocolates. People might just be doing jewelry brands. And you can continue to survive across the board. But that is not the trend in markets like Asia, where the price points are significantly lower. And what you'll see is that a lot of brands today in Asia are actually evolving to become house of brands of sorts, which have traditionally been the P&Gs and the HULs. But that model is becoming more and more prevalent also with the Nykas, the Mama Earths, where you're seeing each one of them becoming almost the sugar. They're having a portfolio of products and brands under their umbrella.
Yeah.
And that's really been the emergence, at least in the Asia ecosystem, where because of lower price points, you definitely need to service a lot many more use cases, cannot be as hyper specialized and create a large outcome for yourself. Right?
That's really cater to the the pyramid.
Absolutely. And within the pyramid, price points differ, and hence you have to take more of the need states for a single user rather than be specialized on one specific need state. Whereas if you have just a concentrated top of the pyramid, then you can just service a single use case and still get away with being a decently profitable brand and decently scalable business. That's been a slight difference in terms of the businesses. Middle East tends to be closer to Asia than to US. But what is different in the Middle East is in the Middle East, you see a lot many more retailers, large retailers, rather than mom and pop brands today. And that's also been because Middle East forte hasn't been manufacturing, it has been more retailing. And so there are a lot of family houses, a lot of large retailers who have a lot of different brands under their portfolio, but largely retailing them within the region. And that's different from how we are set up here in India. India used to be like that maybe 15 years back, where you had, say, the ITCs, the Reliances, the Daburs really kind of licensing out all of these brands and kind of bringing them to market. But now we have seen the emergence of homegrown native brands, and that is not yet there in the Middle East today, where you're seeing a lot of these more consolidated retailers who really hold consumer attention today. There's still evolution in terms of tech itself, which needs to happen, but they're a fast-growing economy. They're a very young economy. The good part is that they're rapidly adopting technology. They're rapidly digitizing. I would say that the pace of digitization is faster than in India, although they're slightly lagging behind. That's what my understanding today is. And these setups are slightly different from large houses to, say, these house of brands which are emerging in India to very niche brands which are in the US. That's happening. But what you would say is that, and China, if you look at it, is a very different market. The way that technology itself is driving commerce is wholly different than the rest of the world. They are the first to, say, jump onto video itself, which were there. They were the first to jump on this whole concept of, say, the Uber brand in itself, where everything was available, the super apps. They were the first to kind of bring those concepts to life. And they have been looking at it from a very different lens, where commerce, social discovery was all part of one platform. TikTokification itself arose from over there. We have seen very different wave in China, but I would say the biggest innovation are happening in Asian markets than in the US markets on the technology side. There, they still tend to, while the adoption has been fast, the innovations are happening over here because consumer behavior it's a very youthful audience, which has not gone through the older internet cycle in some sense. It's a mobile first internet. And now they're rapidly jumping, they're fast forwarding themselves into every new cycle of technology that comes forward. It's a young population that does not have qualms about how to use products. They can switch products at their fingertips if there's a better one at hand. Yeah. So they're not afraid to use digital products or newer experiences. True. What we see is a lot of innovation happening on the technology side in these markets, but which are now being adopted or copied over in the West rather than vice versa, which you typically used to do, at least on the commerce front.
So you brought out points of commerce and the newer technologies, because on my earlier podcast, I think I spoke to a founder who's started, I think, possibly the first or second video commerce company in India. And just recently, I spoke to someone else who's talking about the metaverse playing such a huge role in the retail space. And and since you're in technology, since you're in this space, I really want to dig deep into your insights, into your experience, and really find out. There's so much of talk on AI. How can someone really leverage AI in retail? Because this is something that I think you work pretty heavily on.
One of those things is that I think you look at AI from the lens of where is the use cases rather than what is the technology. Because the technology, like I said, it's again like cloud or internet or mobile, and they were all technological waves. And I think with AI, I would say it's the equivalent of the internet era in some sense. We got access to a lot of things, but now we have got access to reasoning and the ability for us to be able to leverage data in a lot more sophisticated way than we have ever been able to do before in the past today. We needed specialized operators for that, and that has become a lot more accessible with these AI agents, which really can make it more accessible for us, especially these large foundational models and diffusion models that have come to life. I see that it will definitely dramatically change a lot of the consumer experiences. which also means that for brands and retailers, it will also change the way that they operate today. But I think that is going to be an evolution that is not going to be overnight itself. And the simple reason is that while the pace of innovation is really rapid on the infrastructure stack, on the applied stack, there is still gaps today because beyond the chatbot, which you must have seen in every brand or every website by now, there are very few use cases which retailers have really been able to double down on to use it. And hence, I always say that let's look at the use cases. For example, can I do better demand plan? Can I do better assortment for customers? Can I do better understanding of consumers? Can I generate experience? Let's look at specific use cases and then let's look at application of AI. But what we'll see is that while 2023 in some sense was the rise of the infrastructure, 2024 promises to be a lot more of the application of the infrastructure today and rollout of use cases. And so we're seeing some very exciting companies from search, merchandising, on the consumer experience side to on the supply chain side, where there's demand planning, assortment. There's a lot of the stuff that's happening, which is super exciting and which are essentially enabling both productivity improvements for your operators and hence cost efficiency and better way to kind of retail to what you say, the consumer experience for end consumers, where you're looking at more real-time experiences, more hyper-personal experiences now being powered through all of this. And those are the scenarios that we'll start to see to come to life. Obviously, there's the cost of content reduction. You must have seen by now all of the AI generated videos that come to life. That obviously means that the cost of content production might decrease, but it also means that you might have an ability to say that you can put Shah Rukh Khan in every video.
Yes.
If that works, every brand that works for him without he having to spend 24 hours shooting for every brand. But that will also mean the licensing of content will change. Who owns Shah Rukh Khan? Avatar, or who owns Shah Rukh Khan's replica and his ability to kind of license it. We need to see more evolution on those pieces. And I think those are products are starting to come to life today.
As a retailer, and when I say retailer, I'm not really differentiating between offline, online, or whatever. What benefit can he or she derive from Mason?
With Mason, what you're looking to do is that one, help you make your customer data more actionable, where you can bring these hyper personal experiences that lead you, the customer, to say that they want to buy with you. From browse to buy, we want to ensure that the customer feels heard. That's pretty much what our narrative today is and what we bring to the table for you. And what that means is that today you might be either sitting on a ton of consumer data or you might not have that understanding of consumer data and we kind of plug it for you. But what we really bring to the table as a differentiator is that how can the customer feel personal when they shop with you? Have that personal experience when they shop with you. And independent of all channels that they're looking at, whether it's marketplaces, whether it's online, whether it's offline, whether it's your social channels, we want to ensure that they get that personal experience. And that's what we bring to the table. What we bring is an AI-based generative stack that really brings this to life, which spoke about those applied use cases, taking these foundational models and using them for more applied use cases. And that's what we're bringing to life today.
Yeah. And last question, completely aside, I just, on your LinkedIn profile, you said you're the co-pilot. You're working on something called a co-pilot concept.
It's more of this concept of how do we see overall productivity improving, as well as how do we see brands evolving in the future. And really and that goes back to when we initially spoke about what does AI really bring to the table. Today, if you look at it, AI is for these use cases. I think you look at it from this lens of what eventually AI can help you do. And what you'll really see is that today you have this army of operators and people who are kind of helping you get things done. What you really want is the ability to boost your own skills and to be able to get all these things done by itself. And that's really truly what a co-pilot brings to life. In some sense, if any of you have driven a simulator, you must have gone inside the simulator and used that. And you are the co-pilot who's steering the wheel. You are steering this really big machine, whether it's flying a ship or flying an airplane. And that's really what you do as a co-pilot. And our ability is that when you're running that retail empire or that big brand of yours, we can be that co-pilot who can help you steer that.
Super. It was lovely speaking to you, Barada. I enjoyed this discussion. I think fascinating. Go into a real new world that's really emerging. I'm sure it was there, but I think you're seeing a lot of structure now being put into it.
Thank you, Jitendra. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure talking with you and hope to catch you again sometime.
We will. I think we look forward to meeting you in person soon, very soon.
Take care.